I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
And when the Lamb broke the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of the martyrs, slain because of the word of God.
Far Cry 5 is one hot mess. That's not to say that the game is actively bad, far from it, but neither is it an especially good game. In fact, for being one of the year's most anticipated releases and a supposed refinement of the series formula, Far Cry 5 feels stunningly mediocre, a sandbox adventure that's fun in the same way a real sandbox is. Lift the sand, drop the sand, sift the sand, eat the sand, rinse, repeat. We will start with the good. The graphics are fantastic, bright and vibrant with plenty of detail, a rock-solid frame rate on the PS4 Pro, and some truly gorgeous fire effects. Seriously, I loved setting things on fire just to watch them burn. I wonder if I should be worried about that. The voice acting is pretty good. No real standouts here, but no clunkers either. I do have to mention Genessa, I think I'm saying that right, Genessa Grant, who plays Faith, as she takes a character who would otherwise have been portrayed as just another seductive femme fatale flower child, and instead makes her a genuinely calming presence amongst so much chaos. She also manages to convey the sense that Faith does not actually believe everything she says, or everything Joseph says, despite being one of his lieutenants. I wasn't exactly impressed by the performance, but I gotta give kudos for not being just another cliche. The UI is a bit busy for my taste, but it can be easily cleaned up in the options menu, which is a godsend in a game like this. The gameplay is, as always, very good. Shooting is sufficiently heavy without being cumbersome, and there is enough variety that each player will find his own go-to firearms. Customization, though, is very limited, and in most cases I found myself purchasing the exact same customizations for every weapon: a suppressor, an extended clip, and the red dot sight. There are skins for every weapon, along with prestige versions of many, which are just special skins there to, justify the microtransactions. So let's go ahead and address that right now. The microtransactions are not a big deal in Far Cry 5, not in my opinion. You can collect silver bars in-game. I collected myself 200 of them by the end without even trying. I was not looking for them. And there are plenty scattered throughout the game. So there really is very little reason to purchase them with real-world money except as a time saver. As far as what you can purchase with them, players are limited to prestige weapons and outfits. The outfits have absolutely no effect on the game except that 2 or 3 look pretty kick-ass, but the weapons are specially skinned higher-end weapons, which means they technically could give a player a gameplay advantage early on. But considering that all the weapons unlock by the end of the game, I don't see this as an issue. Also, everything purchasable with silver bars is also purchasable with in-game money, so nothing is blocked off by a paywall. Except one outfit that I think you need Rainbow Six Siege in order to unlock. Now for the less good. The mission system has been revamped so that players can do, in theory, whatever they want to do in each region and ignore the things that they don't want to do. There are very few required missions, and even the quote-unquote story missions are largely optional. Virtually everything you do in the game adds reputation points to the game's regions, and when you get to certain milestones, you move the overall narrative forward. It's an interesting idea and a nice change of pace, but in practice, I found myself completing a lot of things I didn't want to do after running out of major missions in order to finish raising my reputation in each region. Not just once, but 3 times. The missions themselves are very rarely anything special. Nothing that I've done in Far Cry 5, and admittedly, I have not completed everything, but nothing I've done compares with, for example, burning marijuana fields in Far Cry 3 to the banging sounds of Skrillex, or, everything in Blood Dragon. I do appreciate how few times you can actually screw up a mission by accident. If hostages die in rescue missions, for example, you only fail the mission if they all die. So 1 or 2 dying can actually make the mission easier on you. I did mess up a mission once by talking to the assigning NPC too many times, which was interesting, but other than that, the missions are a little repetitive, and that's the big issue. Go here, kill people, interact with a box, rinse, repeat. That's not to say I wasn't having fun, but when so many missions are just long-form outpost liberations, the game does start to wear a bit thin. The companion system at first glance is a lot of fun, especially when you recruit first a dog, then a cougar, and then a grizzly bear to fight alongside you. There are, some humans too, but whatever. Thing is, the AI is so ungodly bad that the companions end up getting in the way and actually getting themselves killed way more often than they are genuinely helpful. I set Peaches on fire by accident, so many times that I'm convinced I probably should be locked up for animal cruelty. And Cheeseburger is just too damn big not to be hit by stray bullets. The human companions are varied enough that you can pick teammates who complement your playstyle, but you will often find yourself needing to revive them instead of trading bullets with your enemies, which may, get you killed in the process. Ayn Rand was right. Altruism kills. The boss fights are really quite bad. Faith, in what should have been the most interesting fight, is just plain boring, and insanely easy once you figure out the trick. Jacob is tedious to get to and anticlimactic to fight, and John's fight is genuinely nauseating in how difficult it is to control and how addled his AI can become. Seriously, I had to stop playing the game after fighting him because of how physically ill I felt. I really felt like I was going to throw up. The sections immediately after the boss fights are way more entertaining, even though they are essentially the same exact thing repeated 3 times. Clear the area and escape. As for the final boss fight, it's kind of a neat idea, but it's executed very poorly, and it's way too easy for a final boss fight. But if the worst I can say about the game is that the missions are a bit repetitive, the companions are a bit useless, and the boss fights are a bit uninspired, I could live with that. Far Cry 5 is still an enjoyable game on the whole. But the game has 2 major problems: tone and narrative. The shifts in tone that occur from moment to moment are so jarring that the player is never sure how seriously the game is meant to be taken. Now, I don't fault the game for not having shoot-in political commentary. In fact, I think it would have ruined the game in many ways, contrary to what Polygon is saying. But when the main plot is as dark as it is, it's reasonable to expect the tone to remain fairly dark throughout the entire game. Unfortunately, we get almost nothing in the way of darkness anywhere else in this game. Instead, we get the lighthearted and the over-the-top at every turn, including, I swear to God, a mission to recover the president's pee tape. I really wish I was making that up. And then we are slammed back into apocalyptic warnings, torture, addiction, and commentary on achieving clarity through pain. The required missions are deadly serious and at complete odds with the rest of the game's whole "be young, have fun" ethos. This tonal problem feeds right into the narrative issues. The plot itself, essentially a variation on the whole David Koresh Waco, Texas thing from the early 90s, is an interesting premise that goes nowhere. Because the main plot is only sporadically dealt with, the plot remains limited to these guys are bad, kill them. Right up until the end. Nothing interesting is ever done with the story, except maybe with the ending, which I'll get to in a bit. That just leaves the character development, and this game has zero character development. We barely get character details, and what little we do get is trite and cliche. Only John comes anywhere close to being a well-rounded character, but considering that most players will likely complete his region first, he exits the game rather quickly. Faith is poorly developed, but still manages to be interesting. Jacob is just god-awful, completely disposable. I suspect his story was actually one of the last things worked on because it feels so much more lacking than either of the other two siblings. As for Joseph, for being the main antagonist, he's pretty ho-hum. He says things with a menacing tone and threatens to kill anyone who crosses him, but he never comes across as anything other than a caricature of a villain. The god-awful writing does nothing to help any of this. Dialogue is far too weak for the seriousness of the main story and way too cringeworthy for the rest of the game. And many events in the game make little to no sense, especially in Jacob and Faith's regions. And then there is the ending. The secret ending at the beginning is about as dull as watching molasses dry, and the bad ending can be seen coming from a mile away. But the good ending, what people consider the quote-unquote true ending, feels wildly out of place in this game. Ubisoft claims there are hints scattered throughout the game that point to what's coming, but at no point did I come across any of those hints. During my playthrough, I found nothing hinting at the turn the ending takes. That's not to say it's exactly a bad ending, but it does leave the player scratching his head. It's also a fairly bleak ending, which normally I enjoy, but again, here it's just another example of the game's tonal problems. Which brings me to this. Far Cry 5 is a lot of fun to play, but it has problems. I don't feel that any of those problems is an absolute deal breaker, but I do feel they taint what is an otherwise enjoyable experience. In accordance with Pomegranate Radio's new scoring system, I give Far Cry 5 an 8.1. It's a flawed refinement of the franchise formula, but it's still enjoyable as hell to set angels and other assorted crazies on fire. Stay tuned at the end of the video for a complete breakdown of the score and an explanation of the new scoring system. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Pomegranate.